Today we have a mini mock exam on programming, planning, and practice. It'll be 10 quick questions that, while not exhaustive, should give you a pretty good sense of the types of topics you'll find on the PPP exam. One thing to note, there's a lot of overlap between PPP and some of the other exam topics. You'll notice that some of these questions could easily find themselves on other exams. So one suggestion that I have for you is to consider studying and taking this exam with two other exams, the CDNS, the Construction Documents and Services exam, and the Site Planning exam. You'll find that they are all about kind of the same set of issues, they just look at them from different vantage points. So those are the two obvious ones to do them with, PPP, CDNS, and Site Planning, but there's even going to be some overlap with some of the other topics. But in general, kind of taking those three, thinking of them together, taking some time together when you're doing them, instead of doing them like in silos, kind of think of them all as one thought. But then when you're taking those exams, you have to kind of remember that they come at it from a different aspect. So CDNS will be more about the contractual relationships, PPP will be more about kind of practice management, site planning will be more about the physicality of the site. But they're all going to be sort of similar topics that will kind of run together. So really good ones to kind of consider together and to take together. Okay, with that as a little intro, why don't we just dive right in? So we're going to do 10 questions, and let's take a look at the first one. So the first one I have is, at the beginning of a project, what should the owner give the architect to start the project off? So this is an interesting question that you'll see in various places. I'll talk about this basic question in a lot of different spots. And the reason for that is because it touches on a whole series of different issues. So the first one that I would mention is it starts talking about contracts, right? So, okay, there's clearly a sort of contractual elements that are going to be in the answer to this. The second thing it starts talking about is practice management. So it's referring to kind of how you move through a project and whose roles are what, and what are the sort of the main ways that people start to think about these things. A third thing that starts to be evident in this one is schedules. What comes first? What comes second? What comes third? You start seeing a whole series of different issues that are all PPP related, programming, planning, and practice related. As I said, they're also site planning related and construction document services related, but they're all kind of part of this milieu that you kind of have to understand to be able to really kick off a project. So let's try to answer the question. I have 3 possible spaces here. There's probably 6 or 7 different possible reasonable answers you could put in those 3 slots. But there's a couple of key ones that should definitely be the first ones you think about. So the first one is going to be not terribly surprising. First one I would say is a contract. So if you're going to start a project off and you don't have a contract, and people do this all the time, especially young architects, but all architects. I've done it a bunch of times, and it's a terrible idea. You should never work without a contract. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. The basic reason for it is that people generally think of the contracts as, this is the tool I'm going to use to get myself out of legal trouble down the road. And to be perfectly honest about it, if you're in such legal trouble, some sort of problem that's gone to a court, if things have gotten that bad, the contract probably isn't really going to save you. You're kind of screwed as an architect often in these situations because the fees are not so big that you can spend tens of thousands, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in order in lawyers' fees in order to get your fees back when you didn't get paid. So people think of it as being about the contracts being about legal troubles, but in fact, the main thing that they are really useful for is just making sure that everybody who's starting off the project understands their roles, knows what's being expected of them, understands, sort of controls expectations for what kinds of work is going to get produced. And so it's absolutely the fundamental beginning of the project. First thing that the owner should be handing to you is a signed contract. And that presumably is an a.r.e 101, which would be the owner-architect agreement, but it could be the 104 or the 107 or whatever, depending on the scale of the project. But that's absolutely going to be sort of a first draft of what should start something off. And then you start thinking about it. It's like, okay, you're going to sign this contract, and you're signing contracts, you're coming up with a fee, you're doing all of that. How did you base that? Like, what did you base it on? There's got to be something that you already know about this as a project in order to be able to reasonably sign and negotiate a contract. And what that's going to mean is the program. So the program is that document that talks about square footages, it talks about all the things that the owner needs and the sort of the goals of what they want to get out of it, all of that kind of stuff. And it makes logical sense. You couldn't say to somebody, yes, I'll build you that beautiful school without, and it'll cost this much in architectural fees, without having some sense of it. Well, is it a big school? Is it a small school? Like, that's what the program is going to tell you, kind of what the goals of that project are. So those are the first two that would absolutely be part of it. And program is kind of funny because architects generally think that they should be able to write the program. And oftentimes they do write the program, but it is not part of your basic contract. If you really want to write the program for whatever project it is, you should get that as either an additional service to a B101, or even more likely, you should do it as a separate contract before you start the B101, and then you're essentially handing that program back to the owner. The owner is then handing the program back to you when you start the B101. So those are the first two that I would definitely start with. And then the next one is, I'm going to sort of write kind of vaguely the site. So what I mean by that is the owner gives you the site. That means they should be able to hand you a survey. They should be able to hand you some geotech information, so soils and that kind of thing. They should be able to hand you information about environmental concerns. They should be able to hand you information that goes, anything like that that's about the site that you would need to kick off to start off a process. I remember many years ago I was working with, we were the lead consultants for another architect, and he was telling us a story about how he was working with a client, and the client said, I don't know any surveyors, can you just call a surveyor for me? And he said, well, I'm not really supposed to do that. You're supposed to supply the survey. And he said, well, I don't know anybody. Can you just, So he ended up sending him a list of contact informations for surveyors. The owner contacted the surveyor themselves, and then many months later, when all hell broke loose and the contracts went bad, it actually came down, and he was being held liable for the surveyor, even though he hadn't even called him. He had just given the phone number over for a surveyor. So this it's very untypical for it to actually become a problem, but it's one of those things. There are reasons why people do these things in this way. So contract, program, and then site.
All right, so we have a couple of answers here from Brendan, Spencer, Tatiana, Matthew, and one of the things that many of them had program, many of them also noted site-related things, but budget was a really common one that they thought.
So budget absolutely is a good one. That's another one that I would say. Budget actually falls under program. So the scale of the project, how much money they have to spend, all of that stuff would be part of the program. I could imagine separating it out as well, but that would definitely be part of the program. And then kind of related to the contract and all of that, the other one that I always say, because it implies seriousness, is a retainer. There's nothing like having somebody hand you a check for, even if it's $400 or something like that. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but there's something about that just says, I'm serious, we're all serious, let's do a project together. That wouldn't be probably an answer that would show up on the exam. That's just a little aside.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks to all of you who've tuned in. And if you'd like to attend our next a.r.e live broadcast, visit blackspectacles.com/podcast to register. You'll have a chance to ask questions and share your answers with Mike for live feedback during the broadcast, just like today. And to learn more about our AIA a.r.e prep curriculum, go to blackspectacles.com. We'll include a link in the show notes. And for those of you who are ready and want to go ahead and get busy preparing for the a.r.e, You can use a coupon, a 15% coupon off the first charge on any AIA A.r.e. Prep membership with code 527-15-webinar. That's 527-15-webinar. And that'll expire on June 15th. And of course, if you're already an AIA member, you can visit aia.org/ARE Prep to get a 30% discount for the entire duration of your AIA A.r.e. Prep membership, not just the first charge. And that also expires on June 15th. And finally, please leave a comment below the video to let us know what you think and share any suggestions that you may have. I promise we'll read every word that you write and use them to tune our next episodes. So thanks for watching.